I'm Amy Morgan, the feature writer for the Marriage Initiative, and I am so happy to introduce you to Mark and Melanie Hart. Mark's worked at Life Teen International for 30 years, most recently as Chief Innovation Officer. The movement continues to grow and now involves nearly 2,000 parishes in 24 countries. Mark's become a best-selling author of more than 30 books, an award-winning producer, a popular radio host on Sirius XM, and one of the most sought-after speakers serving in the Catholic Church today. Popular titles include Embracing God's Plan for Your Marriage, a Bible study for couples, Tweet Inspiration, Faith in 140 Characters or Less, and Getting More Out of Marriage, which he and Melanie wrote together. The Harts recently celebrated their 20th anniversary. Welcome. Thank you guys so much for being here.
Thanks for having us.
Thanks for having us.
Well, how did you guys get involved in ministry?
Pretty much, kind of got duped into it, like the prophet Jeremiah would say. It was not the plan, was it? It was not the plan. No, not at all. No, we were both in college and I had a job all lined up and it was going to be in production, in television production, things like that, things that I'd studied. And I got this random phone call one day from our former pastor who was really instrumental in our conversions. Mm-hmm. And he said, would you come be my youth minister? And I did not want to be a youth minister at all. And I said, no, I don't want to do that. And then he did what pastors do. He said, well, we just pray about it, which is so manipulative, so prayed about it. And the Lord and I wrestled and I said, okay, Lord, I'll give you 1 year, just 1 year. And that was 30 years ago.
Yeah. And here we are.
And because she's a saint, she married into this insane world of ministry. And before you know it, she was heading all over the planet with me and Melanie hates speaking and I'm
not a speaker. So, he's a speaker.
So it's sort of a match that only God could dream up, This is how it works.
I love it. I just love that. And you guys have this really sweet story of how you met that also kind of wraps Life Teen into it. So can Mark, you can start telling it and Melanie, or you tell your part.
Well, she looks way better in this story than I do. Okay. So I was a senior in high school. I had a really massive conversion and I went on a Life Teen retreat. And at the end of the retreat, for most youth groups, regardless of denomination, they'll give you a retreat t-shirt. They try to encourage you to wear it to school, to evangelize. And my youth minister, he had these shirts were horrible. They were so bad, right?
They were very bad.
Bright blue. And it was like early 90s. It was like that puffy paint kind of screen. Uh-huh. It was terrible. It's like you were wearing like marshmallows on top of your shirt.
But the shirt is very important because
the shirt's very important. So the shirt, bright blue. I mean, we could have stood on a tarmac and like landed airplanes. It was so bright. Mm-hmm. And it said just very simply, Jesus, 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 in these huge font, right? Yeah. So I go to this huge public high school. And he challenged everybody in the room. And he says, and Mark Hart, I specifically challenge you to wear it. And I thought, this is the end of my social life. It's a 100% cotton chastity shirt. I'll never get a date again. And so I'm walking through my public school hallways in campus, and everyone is just giving it to me, just give me the business all day long. So I was on my last nerve. And we had to go to this, I was going to this event after school I was helping out with.
Oh, wait, hold on. What was the event?
It doesn't really matter. The event doesn't matter. It was just an event. It was an extracurricular event. I was doing a favor for a friend.
It was
Melanie thinks it's important. I want to hear what the event is.
So I had just moved here from Washington my sophomore year. So it was midway through the school year. And they put me in a fashion class because they had no other electives left to put me in. And so we had an end of the year production and you get different vendors and you put on this show that's part of your grade. And he was a volunteer model for it. Because we had to have,
not necessary for the story.
No. Yeah, it is necessary. And because we had to have senior guys do this. And so I was the choreographer for it. And during that, so I really didn't know anybody at the time. But during this production, he was just very sarcastic. He was very difficult to work with, always giving me a hard time.
But we had not met, right?
We hadn't really met.
So the first day we're meeting for this thing, and I was already not excited to do this. I'm there and I see the most beautiful girl I've ever seen in my entire life. I mean, and it was just like, all of a sudden I couldn't talk. I was just like, and I saw her across the stage and she was surrounded by girls and I immediately took a beeline and walked over to her. And then as I was walking, all of a sudden it hit me. I'm wearing my Jesus
Jesus
shirt.
shirt.
And now I'm just mortified because now we've made eye contact. I'm walking directly towards her. It's obvious I'm coming to engage her. So I walked over and.
Well, I was impressed with his shirt.
But she says, nice shirt.
I said, hey, I like your shirt.
And I had been made fun of all day. So I thought she was being sarcastic, still like an idiot. This guy goes, you got a problem with my shirt? How much you can say to this girl you like?
And I said, no, I like your shirt.
And,
that's cool.
And I looked back and said, you're serious? And she said, yeah. And I said, are you Christian? And she said, yeah. And all of a sudden I kind of thought, there's no chance. I said, are you Catholic?
I'm like, yep.
And I was like, I stopped for a second. I was like, thank you, Jesus. And I was like, so the next thing out of my mouth, I go,
Jesus.
And I go, where do you go to church? And
well, I said, I just moved here. I haven't found a parish yet. And I was actually really wanting to get more into my faith at that time. And, because I grew up Protestant and then converted it to Catholicism. And
so I look back and I'm like, well, then come to mass with me this weekend. It just comes out of my mouth. Come to mass with me this weekend. And she goes, okay. And I was like, okay. So our first date was at church. Our first date was at mass.
I love that. Actually, my husband and I, our second date was to church, and after there was water skiing that was after. So it was like, do you want to go to water skiing? Do you want to go to church and water skiing, or just want? I'm like, let's go to church first.
Walking on water, it's great, So, I did not go for that shirt that I make fun of to this day.
No, it was the shirt.
It was the shirt.
It took a lot at our school to wear a shirt like that. So I was like pretty impressed.
The magic shirt.
Yeah, the magic shirt.
I love that. Now, fast forward, y'all have been married 20 years, but for your wedding, you said one of the best benefits of working for ministry is you got a very special blessing. Can you tell your sweet story?
It's not what you know, it's who you know. And so we were planning on getting married out here in Arizona where we live. And we just, the more we got into it, we were looking at the cost and we was like, this is ridiculous. We wanted to go honeymoon in Rome.
Yeah.
And the more we got to talking about it, we just said,
well, it just became very stressful. And I said, why don't we just get married over there?
Rome.
Like, let's just go and bring a few people and just make it about what it's supposed to be. We don't need this big, all this money, and we don't need to do that. We don't need to, spend all that money on that and use our money for, a longer time in Rome. Yeah. So
we literally took her sister, my brother, as maid of honor, best man, took our priest and took our photographer, and we flew to Rome.
That was it.
And we got married in this gorgeous basilica. And then 3 or 4 days later, we were actually granted and called in some favors of friends. We actually got a private audience with Pope St. John Paul II, which was really amazing. But it almost didn't happen. Because you have to get back into your wedding garb. So I put back on my tux
and my dress and
your dress. And I was so nervous because he was really like my hero and really instrumental in our lives as young people, because he always spoke to the young people. And I was so nervous as I was trying to button up the back of her dress. I broke one of her buttons.
Broke one of my little tiny buttons. Like a very, very important button.
So now, let's put it that way.
Not like we have a lot of safety pins around,
To find one in downtown Rome. And it was early in the morning, and I'm so nervous now. Now I'm thinking, oh gosh, her dress is going to fall. It's going to be an international incident. It's going to be on the news.
And then you broke a shoelace. Trying to tie his shoe.
It was a debacle. So we go rushing downstairs. We jump into a cab, and they let us out. And if you've ever been to St. Peter's before in Rome, there's this whole piazza in front of it that's 500 yards long and wide, and it's cobblestone. We got out of the cab and we're trying to get to this auditorium. We're really on the clock.
And I had these stiletto, very high, heels.
We take 2 steps and it's like Bambi on ice, she can't walk.
I'm like, there's no way that I'm walking from here to over there.
You're gonna break your ankle.
Yeah, it was.
So eventually I just scoop her up and I'm carrying her.
He's like, we do a piggyback ride. And I'm like, all right.
And people were
back.
Well, it started with
in your full wedding dress, which is so great.
Wedding dress.
And all these
everything.
There's all these tourists outside. Well, they think this is so cute and romantic. They're all taking pictures and clapping. And I'm like, this is not heroic. This is just necessary. Then we got to the auditorium and we're thinking, oh, we made it. I'm sweating through my tux. She still looks like she's going on a fashion shoot. She looks gorgeous. I look like a pack mule. We get there and the guy in charge of security asked me for my tickets. And I'm like, I know exactly where they are. They're on the nightstand in our hotel room.
Forgot the ticket. to get in.
I'm so nervous. So now I'm trying to talk our way in to a private audience with the Pope. And I'm like, why? He's like, well, how do I know you're supposed to be here? I'm like, why would anybody put this on just to try to get in for free and, illegally? And, and finally there was this cardinal or bishop or somebody who was he could see the look on my face, and he could tell I was just mortified and abhorred and like beautiful. She's beautiful. I'm like, oh, I'm sorry. And he lets us through, and we were able to sit there, and we were able to have a private audience with John Paul II, and he blessed our marriage, and it was really beautiful. It was amazing.
Yeah, it was
incredible moment. That is so wonderful. And I'm so glad y'all told those two stories, because that is, as one of our goals here is for our marriage champions to get to know you, as they consider inviting you to speak, or they look for your resources. And so they can see your sense of humor, they can see your goodwill, and they can really get a sense of who you are. So thank you for sharing those. Great. I love those. I love those. And then as you, continued on your ministry with teens and everything, you started transitioning to writing a little bit more about what you were doing. And you wrote, you're embracing God's plan for marriages, which is a study, a Bible study for couples. So let's talk about that.
Well, when I was first asked to write, I said no, because I was not study writer. I was not a writer. And then I started doing some books for teens, and I started learning more about the art of writing, the craft of writing. And then one of my publishers came and they said, would you two do a book on marriage together? And we started laughing. Like I pitched the idea to you, remember? We're out to dinner having a glass of wine, and I thought you almost going to spit it out. Like she was like laughing so hard. And you said like,
well, and we had littles at the time.
Oh yeah.
And I mean, I hardly had any brain cells functioning, because we were so tired.
But we started laughing at dinner that I remember like, why in the world would anybody ask us to write a marriage book? Right. Are you kidding me? Like we're a train wreck. Like we should be writing a marriage book or giving advice. Like we're the last ones.
Right.
And then I jokingly said, I'm like, what we should do is we should just write a book about our failures in marriage. Like, that would be kind of funny, which we ended up doing years later. But
our parenting
failures. But this Bible study book, it just kind of came up. Yeah, that's the one. Yeah. So, but this Bible study book, it kind of just came around, and we just said, well, what if we just try? And we sat down and we tried to work on it, and we got in a fight.
Yeah.
And then we sat down a second time and got in another fight. And then finally the third, and I think what we said was obviously we're being attacked. There's spiritual attack going on. The enemy does not want this. So that's when we were praying one night. We just said, we're obviously we're supposed to do this, because you don't kind of see that kind of attack. The devil doesn't mess with things that aren't going to produce fruit, Right. So we said yes. And honestly, when you read those Bible studies, it's really, it's my love for scripture and Mel's natural, I think, spiritual gift of counsel and wisdom. So, she talks, I write, we go through the editing process. We toil, we wrestle.
Discussion
the whole time. Basically, we were just doing Bible study with each other, and then we just kind of committed it to paper.
No, but I love that. And two, another thing, Mark, that you did is you have a book called Ask the Bible Geek that is kind of explain some of those Bible questions, because historically the Catholic Church, that hasn't always been the emphasis, is kind of the people reading the Bible for themselves. And so this is really, you have that great kind of understanding of things that people might want to know and what they need to know, and how that pertains to their Catholic faith and their marriage. And so it's a really great way to kind of get into the scripture in a way that you kind of explained why you wanted to do it for couples.
Yeah, and truthfully, Melanie, growing up Protestant, she had a way more exposure to the Bible growing up than I did. In most Catholic households, I obviously can't speak for everybody, the Bible, it was something that was very important because it held up all the other books on the shelf, but we didn't actually take it down and read it as a family, So it wasn't until much later that I started falling in love with scripture. But but like your grandmothers had introduced the Bible to you, So it was just something I think that it was always supposed to be there, and I think my love got developed for it over time. The same way that I think your love for the faith developed over time as you kind of got more.
It's kind of the opposite. Yeah.
So it's a really great combination. And so what will a couple get out of this when it has some discussion questions? It has, one of the things that's very practical, it has application, right?
I think my hope, I'm going to speak for you, but I think my hope is, because you love doing these interviews so much.
I love them so much.
I think my hope is just, I think there's a lot of books, especially in the Catholic market, that are come out about marriage and family and that kind of thing. And they're often written from a very clinical perspective, where it's just, and it's not bad. The people have like a lot of degrees and a lot of letters after, and that's just great. But it can oftentimes, I think, and we've talked about this, we've seen some that felt very sterile. It just didn't feel like they were being written by real people.
We wanted something more authentic, more relatable,
more raw, and I think and for us, it's always about practical. Like if it's just theoretical and you can't really immediately put it into like your Monday or put it into like your Thursday, well then what was the benefit? I was enlightened, stimulated intellectually, but it didn't really change our marriage. And I think that was what we were hoping to do, was give something relatable, practical, that any couple, regardless of how long they've been married, regardless of how engaged one or the other or both are or are not in their faith, that would just elicit conversation. Because anymore, that's like, and I don't know if you find this in marriage, that becomes the hardest thing. You're having kids, you're busy with work, you're exhausted in the day, and you have to be really intentional about that conversation time and about prayer time. Like if you don't get intentional about it, it just goes to the wayside.
Yeah, I love that. And you have spotlight couples in there too, some examples, right?
Absolutely. Well, we didn't want it to just to be our voices, and our lack of wisdom. So we went and asked couples, most of whom were about 5 or 10 years older than us, people who had been
role models to us.
Yeah, role models who had been adult leaders or core members or youth ministers, people that we looked up to, or that we had been at their weddings and watched their courtship and watched them start having families. And we just asked them, we said like, hey, what's your secret? Don't give us like the theology, give us like the practicality. You've been through some tough stuff. What's your secret? You've survived a lot, They
were very raw and real people, very authentic, which we wanted. That was very important for us to just to be authentic.
Yeah. And we picked different people who had been through medical issues, financial issues, marital issues, strains, just so people who have been through, they've seen their tour of duty, and they've been through it and they've come out the other side, and I think that's always important, is to find out if you can find people who are really real about their marriage and about their misgivings and failures and where they've gone wrong. That's where the real wisdom is. It's not in the newlywed couple that's been around for 6 months and still got it all figured out. You know what I mean? Like it's 20, 30 years,
You've gone through something.
Right, exactly.
No diapers involved yet.
Right.
Or when someone like looks at you with that, when they haven't had kids yet, nothing, I'm so tired, and you're thinking to yourself, you ain't seen nothing yet.
No, not until you've lived with a colicky baby for a while.
No, that's right.
Or four.
Or four. All 4 of ours were colicky.
Oh.
There's a decade. I don't think we remember.
I know.
I had 2 colicky, and we were done. Colic and asthma, and I was like, oh no, we're like we will not be doing this again.
Right, it's very stressful.
You go through it once as a wonder if you have a second.
Yeah. We actually looked at our older son at one point and said, "Did we have to have a sibling?"
God lets you forget. God lets you, it's selective memory. He lets you forget to bless the world,
That's right. Well, I love it. So that's a great resource. And then you had this one, Getting More Out of Marriage, you published just a few years ago, although I guess it's almost 2019. And what will people find? You wrote had even more of a voice in this one, Melanie, right?
Yeah, in the intro.
Yeah.
Honestly, that was just the first one. So many people had used it, and then people kept saying, "Would you do something else? Would you do something more?" And it was really more about just trying to go deeper. Using scripture as a way to go deeper, and to be able to kind of analyze where your marriage is or isn't, and to be able to, I think maybe give God permission to kind of show you where those gaps were, because over time. Again, if you're not intentional, you can become like ships in the night. There's always another soccer practice, and there's always another dance recital, and there's always another, homework, another trip. And, it was more about helping couples to sit down and connect again. And what was ironic was it came out in 2019. Obviously, we didn't know 2020 was going to be the pandemic.
No.
So I started getting emails from all these different couples being like, I mean, usually when something like this, the wife said, "I forced my husband to sit down and do this with me." Yeah. But it's elicited good or great discussions or whatever, or it's just what we needed during COVID or that kind of a thing. Because all of a sudden, I think it was really divinely inspired. Because all of a sudden, all these couples were forced to spend tons of time together, right? And it was. I mean, I think it was bringing a lot of things to the surface.
Yeah.
That maybe had been dormant or just kind of lying there for a while and untouched.
Right.
Yeah. And that was, and one of the things too, for those who are interested in this, you have some online video introductions that go with it, correct?
Yeah. There's a QR code, and they can hit that, and they can watch the intro right on their phone. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and that kind of gets them in the spirit of it. And at the end, let's talk about actually some of the things, because again, it's tiny, but it's so profound. I mean, it's so easy for couples to pick this up and do this together.
Yeah, that was another really beautiful selling point. Word Amongst, they do a great job with the stuff they put out, really bringing the word to life in people's lives. And when they asked if we would do it, that was a big thing for me. It wasn't just a matter of time, do we have time to do another? Mm-hmm. But it was really more, I said, can we make it small, so it's a lower price point, just so, because it's one thing to ask people to invest financially, it's another thing to invest their time. So we said, can we keep it small for parents who are really on the go, or for couples who are on the go, who have a lot going on? Yeah. They can't devote like an hour and a half to a Bible study, but they can give you 20 minutes or 30 minutes tops,
Yeah. And you have, it starts with rediscovering the Sabbath, which I thought was really interesting, that's something that kind of finds its way in other of your writings. You want to touch a little bit about that, about what the Sabbath kind of means to you guys? And
well, that's I got to give Mel full credit on that one. We have very different love languages. Is that fair to say?
As most couples do.
Yes. My love language is sarcasm. No, I'm just kidding. No, but Mel's is emotional presence. And I think we learned very early on in marriage, like I was kind of more of like give me the honey-do list, babe. Like, give me the task list.
The task
and
doer.
I'll knock that thing out in a Saturday, But what we ended up butting heads a lot of the time would be like when she just wanted me to sit on the couch and just be present, when and there was no tasks involved, and there was no screens involved.
Putting everything aside, and
you taught me. She's still teaching me that 20 years later. She's still teaching me.
It's still a challenge.
It's hard. Yeah, I'm just not wired that way.
We have to be more intentional, and but just having that time, making that time, and yes, putting all the screens away, and just.
But that's you actually taught me so much. I mean, I understood Sabbath from a scriptural perspective.
Yeah.
But I think for a lot of us, regardless of denomination, I think we kind of keep holy the Sabbath to get to church on Sunday, check the box.
Yeah.
And in God's mind, that's not at all what keep the Sabbath means. And then I think what is happening with life as you get older, and maybe if God sends you kids, all of a sudden now Sundays become full of everything. I mean, you've got tournaments and yard work and laundry and housework and groceries. And it's supposed to be this day of rest where you like enter into your relationship with God, with your spouse, and I think we had fallen into that trap for a while. It was Sunday became a catch-all for everything else. And as long as we got to church, we thought we were great. And it was Mel who put her hand up and said, we're not doing a very good job at handing the faith on to our kids right now. Like, we have to get a lot more intentional with our Sundays. So I think you coined it Take Back Sunday, right? It was just sort of like, that's what we're going to do. We're going to get really intentional, and we're going to make Sundays about God and about family. And it's made all the difference in our family.
That I love that. And I think that's a real inspiration for our marriage champions. Some of them may be going, ooh, I can see how we've let that slip, especially with NFL on Sundays.
Anything you read in any book we've done, we're just preaching to ourselves.
Seriously.
And the publisher just decided to let someone else read our diary.
Right. We're learning.
I love it. Well, and then at the very end of the book, which I thought was really sweet and useful for Catholic couples, you have particular prayers that I just thought were really sweet about finding time and space to be present, to receive and give forgiveness, to have a faithful and enduring love. They're already facing challenges together, communicating, and just really lovely prayers there, just to make it easy. You don't have to reinvent the wheel. You've got some really lovely ones right there.
Thanks. Yeah, I think I'll speak for guys. A lot of guys I know. If they were not raised in the faith, and a lot of times in the Catholic Church, it's really easy to kind of show up and punch your holy card and leave without really being engaged. You know what I mean? And that's just the reality. A lot of guys I know, it's not that they won't pray with their wives, it's that they don't know how to, or they feel like they lack the words, and they feel silly. They try to just kind of do like a perfunctory prayer out loud, spontaneous prayer, and they don't feel like, and it just kind of comes out like that scene with Ben Stiller and Meet the Parents, where it's just, bountiful fountains of, day by day by day. And they don't know what to do. And so we thought, if we could actually compose some prayers and then also steal some from the Catholic tradition that already exists, it would just make it easier, make it a little bit of an easier lift, especially for couples who aren't accustomed to praying out loud together or with each other.
Yeah. It is surprising. I lead a prayer group with friends, and it's surprising. Praying out loud is very intimidating to a lot of people. And so, but if you can just read something that's written, that takes that edge, it just, people are usually willing to do that because that's not that hard.
For sure. And that's one of the things that you've always like championed, like if we've ever like spoken to engaged couples and that kind of thing. And I think one of the really profound points you'd always say, it's like that sex in marriage is the easy part. That's bearing your body. Prayer in marriage is actually bearing your soul, right? And that was like, you put that exclamation point out there and people would always go, oh, is that why it's so? Because you're bearing the most intimate, broken parts of your life, right. And while that should be easy to do with your spouse, it isn't always easy.
Yeah. Yeah, but you have a great way to get people started. Well, I do not want to run out of time before we talk about this, because this was one of my favorites. I just think this is the cutest thing. And it's, inspiring people to laugh. You can see I've got like all sorts of little dog ears here because there were so many that I really liked. But what is this? Tweet inspiration, faith in 140 characters or less.
Well, before Twitter was X, and before they took away, like they used to have a word count, right? You had for character count, you had to have 140 characters or less. And when Twitter first came out, I just thought, what a fun challenge to try to come up with something funny or profound or thought provoking, especially when it comes to the faith, because for me, it was like, how do you interrupt someone's feed with Jesus? How do you interrupt someone's feed with scripture, or with a thought? And then what it really became was, more than anything, like our kids were just giving us incredible material. This is when they were all littles, and they would come up, because the kids say the wildest stuff, right? And stuff would come out of their mouths. And I think for us, it was just a way to almost spontaneously record what they were doing. That was funny because, she's nursing a baby and she's trying to make a meal, and I'm trying to clean up a mess. There's kids running around, and something funny would happen. And for me, it was just, I got to write that down because we're going to forget what they just said. We're going to forget it. And then all of a sudden I started tweeting it, and then people like would comment on it. And I think it was just trying to provide a little bit of inspiration, like God's word, or a little bit of levity and that kind of thing in the middle of people's feeds, which were usually filled with all kinds of debate, turmoil, shouting each other. People just shout at each other too much, and they just won't listen, and it just, like life's supposed to be a blessing. Life's supposed to be beautiful, but oftentimes we just kind of focus on what's wrong instead of what's right.
Yeah, I think my favorite one, since we mentioned the NFL and being a mom of boys, that's something that features prominently in our life. But I think one of my favorite ones is the command to love your enemies. Sure would be easier if it weren't just starting football season.
Yeah, that was mine. That wasn't the kids, that was mine.
That was one of my favorites. Or here's another one that was just a little bit more spiritual. You can usually tell by the look on someone's face if they woke up counting their problems or their blessings. James 1:17.
Yeah, that's all her. That was all her.
Oh, I love that. Another good one was God's speaking, #listen. Remember when everything was hashtag back? Everything.
Yeah, that was just another example of me talking to myself. I'm one of those. Mel is so good at listening to the Lord and being docile. You are. And I'm not. I'll go in for my holy hour.
It's a struggle for me too.
It'll be 57 minutes of fighting distractions and talking to God, and then I finally remember to shut up and listen. And those last 3 minutes are sublime, though. They're really, really good. A lot out of it.
I love that. That is good. Well, and then here's the book that you were talking about, that you kind of talk about what not to do in your whole family and parenting. And you have some really fun stories in there too.
That book, it literally did start when we were laughing about writing a parenting book, and we said we should literally just share our embarrassing stories, our screw ups, so that someone else can benefit from it and avoid the same pitfalls and minefields. And so really
it's not about what we did right. It's really
about
what we did wrong.
And how the Lord in his mercy spared us.
Use that to grow us.
But from the first story, I think one of the first stories, not the first one, was, I think in the intro, we're talking about when you were 9 months pregnant, you were getting into the bathtub and all the Barbies were all naked because, after a Barbie never has clothes on after you buy it, ever.
No, that's right.
Yeah. When you have girls, it's just.
But remember, started crying in your third trimester, and I'm like, because you're looking at all these Barbies staring at you. And
I think I just started crying.
Baby number 4, and it was just like this great reminder about like how men and women are built so differently, and like this, But I think one of the first stories we're told about was our third daughter. We'll call her Faith because that's her name. Our third daughter. We went to Ash Wednesday service at our church. Remember we were walking forward, and and she was like our princessy, girly girl,
girly,
fashionista,
sassy girl.
So she was good, and I think that she was really young. I think she started to see. She saw her sisters ahead of her, and she saw everybody like walking up, and they're walking back with this dirt on their head. So she walks up. Remember the deacon?
She didn't want any part of that.
She's
like, I'm not having that on my head.
The poor old deacon, he's probably like in his 60s, and he's trying to get ashes on her forehead.
And she swatted.
Him. Oh my! And the thing,
it was so embarrassing.
The metal dish went flying.
Oh no!
The tile steps of the sanctuary were like. And, I mean, if we could, and it was right in front of the whole church. I mean, everybody could, and like we were like. Oh God, we could have slithered out of there. It was like, oh, here come the Harts. Worst parents in history. I mean, there's a cloud of ashes everywhere. I mean, it was, oh my gosh. And that's just one of many failure stories we shared.
I love it. Oh, I love it. I think our marriage champions were all laughing right now, and they are all feeling better about themselves and feeling very much like they know you and like they really want to meet you. So we have accomplished our goal. Mark,
I'm not sure we raised the bar, but you can definitely limbo underneath ours.
No, y'all are great. Thank you so much for being here.
Oh, thanks for having us. We appreciate it. Thanks for everything you're doing.
Yeah.
Just for couples. It's not, it's not easy. It's not easy being married in the modern age. It's just really, really not. So we need each other. We need to pray for each other.
Right. We need
support each other. Yeah, absolutely.
Yep. Rising tide that lifts all boats. Right.
Mm-hmm.
That's it.
Yep.
Anyway, marriage champions, if you'd like more information about Mark and Melanie Hart and their resources, you can always find us at marriageinitiative.org or marriageresources.org.